Welcome. I am your HappyHealer lover. Today's date is Monday, as you know, August 2nd, 2021. Looks like our audio is working just fine, which is always great to know. And we're going to have a great show for you this evening. As you know, it's going to be about Flight 28 of British Airways. But before we get into that, we're just going to allow folks to come on here as we do. I hope everybody's having a wonderful Monday and a great start to a new week. Certainly sounds like a great idea to me. And so do welcome. And if you're from the group, I would appreciate it if right now you could share this to the group so that we can have some folks from the group realizing that we're on live. And remember, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. we go live. And that's just the way that goes every single time. We'll always be sharp to that and on time, so you don't have to worry. We have so much to learn on this episode. And welcome to episode 9 of AmericanMantics, the system of God's love and truth that puts the interests and lives of people before the interests and lives of greed. Also, I'll show me flying my own plane during this program, so you don't want to miss that either. I think that you're going to enjoy that. Flight 28 Air Disaster British Airways is what we'll be getting into, and 56 people died in a fire that quickly spread across the fuselage, and it quickly engulfed the plane because of a crack in the jet engine cam combustor. Why did 56 people have to die on a plane that never even left the ground officially? Find out that and more as we contrast and compare the values of AmericanMantics that would have been more prudent in the safety issues that consistently leave people in danger's way in the world of Greedhell. Though it goes so much deeper than that, and we'll cover the accident, the stories of people on the plane who struggled for their own lives. We have people who survived and didn't survive seated next to each other. How can one person survive and another one doesn't? Find out that and so much more on episode 9, AmericanMantics. Today, it is 7 p.m. live, sharp. Welcome to the program. We are every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. weekly. So this is live. Let's get back to our story on this plane crash and the unfortunate souls who did not make it. The slow acceleration really was a clue, but so were so many other things, also clues about British Airways Flight 28. It was a catastrophic accident brought on by a damaged cam that caused the accident. Though, going back, well before the incident occurred, mechanics, quality controlmen, pilots, and more professionals all had part in this situation, and it still happened anyway. All 56 people still died anyway. The fire quickly engulfed the plane caused by cracks inside the jet engine cam combustor. It was earlier repaired when it should not have been repaired due to the crack being too long to repair in the first place. They repaired and used it anyway. They had no way of knowing that it wasn't sufficiently sealed, welded shut, and that the damaged combustor was the reason for this crash. Mechanics repaired the crack in that cam in accordance with the procedures laid out in the repair manual. They welded them closed The crack on Cam 9 was unusually long, however. The manual never said how long the crack could be that would require a repair. There was no exact information provided in the manual for that particular fix. Which tells us, even when you failed that first time, that information should never be left to guesswork. That all details of direction must be spelled out and contingency plans made in the event of an emergency, and planning for success in every step of the process. That's what they failed to do. This was mistake number 1, which kicked the entire incident off. It never had to happen. But if it wasn't for there being no specific guidance as to the acceptable length of the crack that can be safely repaired, before it was necessary to actually use a factory replaced parts, and of course, as we already know in Greedhell, companies always serve to the cause of profit before any other consideration, even when they're relying upon critical infrastructure placement requiring their use by people who trust that company for their safety, though still yet to be placed in harm's way by the greed of corrupt companies who designed in their inceptions to put profit considerations ahead of their obligation to the people. Be safe and uphold the best practices within our combined means to see to it that our environment is safe. It's so important. We don't want people dying because of silly reasons. That's what we're trying to grow up and grow out and take on new challenges. Not get killed by greed's corrupt nature, and every aspect of its business is built for profit instead of service for people who matter to them. The riding passengers, just as long as they arrived, was a success. It doesn't matter if they rode a tin can to get there at that point, as so long as on that day they got there. So the plan was perverted, and it came more about getting people to places within an acceptable safety margin, rather than making it about doing their very best quality that they can put forth. That's just one instance of how greed kills innocent people and how other people accept it. They don't make it their business to work to eliminate problems. But where we fail are often in areas where we could have succeeded if only we did our best. Sure, accidents are going to happen anyway. But greed just gets on those accidents using these facts as an acceptable bargaining chip for taking substandard steps to maximize profits across America's corporations is commonplace and around the world. It's not about serving people more than it is about making profit, even at the behest of the people. And that's what the problem is. And that's what it shows. And that would only ever be acceptable in a world of Greedhell. God's world wouldn't be like that. And we have justice too, because real justice would fix a real problem I just described. Instead, we have class action lawsuits where bribes are paid to those who suffered, and then the problems continue going on. Because like I always say, greed is hell-bent on death for humanity. Money being spent that could have gone to the hungry, instead going to hush people up, that allows us all this to continue where new people die? Sure. Yeah, devilish place for Greedhell's gonna be happy about bringing on this hell and where we conduct ourselves and allow. And so its main objective, has been reached when we do that. So let's move along. After putting the engine back in the plane, mechanics had no way of knowing that the damaged combustor that they just fixed wasn't working properly. It just wasn't possible to see the combustor cam being the problem in the engine. After all of that, putting it back together, they wouldn't want to dismount the engine at this point, and the hope was to make any effort possible that could get around that. So since the repair, there's been 11 reports of slow acceleration in engine 9, this engine. Future reports did not ring any alarm bells because there were 11 reports of sluggish engine performance that had already been made. So instead of actually dealing with the failed repair that they could no longer see or witness by pulling the engine apart again, they instead began to investigate other causes again, keeping the stricken plane in service while they do it, despite repeated attempts by pilots who continued to make complaints of the same continued problems. That was not obviously going away or being dealt with because of cost concerns of removing the engines and taking them apart. The problems at this point just weren't enough to be dealt with by a greedy corporation, hell-bent on the collection of pointless bucks rather than the safe transportation of God's precious people. Their mistake was believing that some of those people were expendable and planning for it in the way they operate, and putting cost concerns ahead of the concerns of their individual and collective customers, human beings who matter and they have purpose and value. And instead of living out their fate that could have changed this world for the better, their lives were cut short and extinguished by a greedy system that won't remember their names because its goal is death of humanity, making them not matter anymore. Little by little, we have gotten to this point where we are today, where people have lost any conceivable amount of human values and freedom because of the greed, the energy of the devil, I tell you. It pushes hate through people until there's no possible way to function. Sound familiar? That we lose our way. People are driven to the point of insanity. And that's how people act often, with an insane amount of hate for people that are actually their friends. Indeed, their family. And that's the devil's cunning plan. And you can see the truth by witnessing the truth around us. It's all God's creation. And it tells us what we need to know. And knowledge is power. And that is why an honest truth is so ever important in dealing with real problems who matter have. They have purpose and value. In a never-ending quest to improve the conditions in which God's people live, causing for increasing and greater amounts of happiness. That should be our goal. And to me, they're breaking those rules tremendously and all over the place in this story. It's just gotten too interwoven in our people, that Greedhell, so that it's pestered its greedy head in our real lives, causing people to matter less and for human lives to suffer greatly, living shorter lives they otherwise could have, even dying from misery and depression. All kinds of things killing in Greedhell, and Greedhell has a way of dishing it out like no other. That is the true gem in Greedhell, to steal the value of humanity, from which the value of money had taken its place. and then to squander it on things that don't matter to the value of people. And instead, it was for people to know and experience life in a world where their value had been stripped, to be placed in a position in defending their own value to the cause of life itself and failing, with death taking over. Life is always in a death struggle, and life's a gem, indeed. Humanity should have a chance to stay alive in a world that automatically knows its values and cares for it. But that doesn't happen. This is God's world, and the devil had stolen it. No wonder everything has been stolen from us the moment our value has been stripped from the experience of our lives. That it became real. Money mattered more than people do. And it was affirmed by the dead bodies and the poor souls who lived through its hell and tried to experience life, tried to offer up the better part of themselves, and suffered for having made the effort. We're told to earn a living in a world where we've clearly already earned that living. And it was time to advance further. The devil was hell-bent on stopping God's people using cunning and clever ways that would amount to human death for all. And he wanted the people to have the blame that it was their own sin, when they all could have alternatively had heaven, even when God had given them all the advantage and the ability that the devil's powers over knowledge, the truth of God's creation, and that in spite of human value, people would die en masse. To me, that is a true and grave travesty, but yet to our hope still playing out. This war is not yet over, and that's where AmericanMantics comes in. And I will never let you forget how important you are. And it is to see the real cause of problems that infect and therefore affect every aspect of our lives. It's up to us to fix this horrendous problem and to see how much greater life is for fixing this situation where greed's wretched misery is causing the death of millions of people. So the mechanics, they decided to deal with the problem by making minor adjustments to attempt to fix the plane's idle speed, and kept the plane in operation. The cockpit voice recorder showed that the cockpit crew was aware, but the long entry had made the captain believe that the problem had been solved, but that the captain had, from that cockpit recording, later stated that he couldn't see there was a problem because the previous reports of engine performance and issues, that the mechanics themselves have cleared the plane for operation. He later exclaimed that the plane had been in service without problems on the previous flights, where he was the one piloting it. This shows, despite having a serious problem on their hands, getting worse and progressively leading to an incident that will take the lives of 56 of God's people, that not even gave them any warnings and continued in consideration by the people who mattered themselves, was enough to overcome the powers, systems, and processes of greed that would have Greedhell take the easy way out to save costs. They preferred not to pay to ensure the lives of people who mattered, because what mattered more were the costs themselves, not the people. That's what that says. But did you hear the pilot say that? No. because he claimed there was no way for him to logically tell there was a problem, or that if there was any reason for consideration of a problem, that it had been dealt with after having been checked and placed back in service by technicians, despite the fact that it's been reviewed by him in the lead up to, but before the actual incident itself. So it was impossible for him to make an issue of it. Most of us have been in situations where we have raised alarm bells too often in relation to problems that never materialized. In Greedhell, those of us who do that quickly learn of the frustration of our superiors who are more concerned with the profit considerations, that we are causing too many problems and cost the bottom line too much. And thus people tend to learn in life to balance the value of life versus the cost of dangers, and often getting it wrong. And when they get it right, it's not always because the plan was right. Not for people who matter and should not be left to luck, but rather the most prudent care and consideration to live happy and sustain lives with magical outcomes and happy, steady, hopeful progress that drives the ingenuity of creativity and the journey of life, driving it forward. Though greed is a lazy force, and it's out to convince people their destiny was meant to be lived toiling away in one spot for 60 years, always throwing away any higher notion to serve to the greater collective cause of humanity, to improve all lives and make people sweethearts who care, and for life to be safe, and for our progress to be over profit. That progress is profit is more like how God's people would see it, because people are valued, and so then progress in the lives of those people is what being profitable is, or certainly the only profit that matters. Profit in Greedhell is a pointless collection of bucks, and it's always important for us, God's people, to contrast and compare the actual truth against the cunning lie everywhere we can. Because the devil's mockingbirds are always around the corner, looking to tell you why you're wrong, thinking God's people have value, or that we should change a single thing about Greedhell. Those things are quite nice, actually, in the minds of those who have been so corrupted by Greedhell, they lack the honest vision to see clearly anymore. The devil's greed and fear has driven them blind, but yet they still belong to God. So it's our job to help them see, so that we can all get out of this mess together. So, they will need the greatest help to gain the vision. That is our role. We are their teachers. Never underestimate the power of the blind man's greedy mission. I have a friend that for his entire life, he's always expressed his will to live for God. Though, in the last few years, I've learned something about my lifelong friend, and that is how he saw himself. And in his essence wasn't simply his soul and body and the people he shared this world with, but rather it was his money that was his essence. That money that was in the bank and stowed away to serve another day. He saw the money he made throughout his life, from the work he performed, to be his living essence. His future will and power to express it safely in the bank, safely stowed away for his future. And his greatest fear is that anyone would touch his essence. That was a sin. To burn another man's essence is the way he would see it. We had a long debate about this, and he was mightily faithful, just as I am, but believed this money to be his essence. And that is the greatest sin. That is the point we lose our value to money. And it's a physical representation by someone who I've loved all of my life and continue to love, and who's smart and to whom I've looked up to all of my life, and now tells me in the living flesh that his essence is wrapped up in the money in the bank. It was no wonder to me at that very moment why people commit suicide over money issues. Why the lie that the corrupt Enron executives perpetrated upon its own employees showed employees have given their life's work and value, putting away the literal representation of the core of their value, and then lost it. And many of them killed themselves. Now you know why. Many of the people victimized by the Ponzi schemes of countless fraudulent billionaires, like Bernie Madoff, who's had their lives end in suicide. See how cunning that devil can really be? When I say everything has been infected by the devil, incited, and then you know the extent that this battle we're having on behalf of God is, using God's powers that, luckily for us, are many more times powerful than the devil's powers. Though the devil mocks and laughs at God's plan, because despite that truth, he wins in large ways. And all because we allow the sin to persist. In part, it's because we're blind to it. And that's why I'll always speak the truth in certain terms with all of my might. And have dedicated this program of AmericanMantics to that effect. That their profit is their essence, they say. Their money is their essence. I'll tell you a story one day, and you'll enjoy it. But let's think about the cause death on this day. Realize, if it wasn't for the greed and lazy ways of Greedhell, then all of these things could have turned out much better. What were those things that caused the death of British Airways Flight 28? The door was jammed when the plane came to a stop. This was due to a faulty design and was since redesigned so subsequent aircraft wouldn't have a problem. Glad to see it fixed, though they could have done more to make sure the doors were working properly before this flight, as it was conceivable such an emergency would eventually take place and the doors would need to work properly. The flight attendant took an additional life-saving minute or two in order to get that door unjammed. Now, let's look at some other items. The mechanic didn't fix the problem, but thought they did fix it. They didn't. Or at the very least, allowed themselves to believe they fixed it for the sake of not having to do extra pointless work in their minds. The mechanic's boss wanted to save money. Instead of removing the engine to see what the engine's problems were, because nothing else was fixing it. But yet, they still decided not to. We can only say that they used language that allowed them to move on. And they seek cost-cutting measures in as many areas as possible to keep operations going. But this plane's engine was sluggish. And instead of fixing it, that fixed it, it was only giving the impression that it was fixed, which misled the pilots. And it misled them to thinking that it was resolved, or it just wasn't even a big deal at all. And then there was the wind that added to the problem of the fire. There was a general wind blowing fire towards the plane from the engine area. And the way Flight 28 and the pilots had actually ended when they stopped the plane, and the way the wind was blowing against that side of the fuselage. And what killed them ultimately was smoke, not fires. So there were studies that went into minimizing smoke fatalities, and what they determined was not much can be done in a short time, because passengers can only count on 90 seconds of safe airtime before smoke can cause them death or great bodily injury, leave them asphyxiated and unable to get out. And that the reverse thrust was shooting engine fire back at the fuselage. And the pilot decided not to use the brakes on the wheels and instead used the reverse thrusters, which spreaded the fire. Now I want you to imagine a woman who was with her boyfriend who witnessed this situation, and I want you to think about what actually happened. And she was around 30 years of age. Her name was Anna. The plane was running down the runway, and her boyfriend was sitting with her, and she seen the fire on the left engine side of the plane. And what did she do? What can she do? She took stock of the situation and quickly decided she must do something to survive. She said, "Mike, follow me. We have to get out of here," despite knowing that it was forbidden. The seatbelt sign was on. The flight attendant was not allowing anyone to get up. And she wouldn't listen to the flight attendant, who asked her to go back to your seat. She said to her, flat out, "No, I will not be where there is a potential explosion or certain death. I'm moving forward and I'm moving away from that fire." And again called out to her boyfriend, "Mike, follow me." And now she was moving fast towards the front of the plane as it came to a stop, and all passengers began to move towards the emergency disembarkments. And she checked back and seen that Mike was behind her, but about 7 rows back. They both were unable to advance too much, but eventually got about 15 rows forward, but were still in danger. Smoke was quickly filling the cabin. And as she can hardly see Mike, as he was being obscured by smoke, and she was approaching the exit herself finally, she turned and yelled to Mike, "Mike, you get off this plane! I will see you at the bottom." She was worried. She hadn't seen him. So she was outside waiting for Mike, who finally rushed up beside her. He stated nobody behind him made it, and that he almost couldn't make it out himself. The smoke was overbearing, and it was leaving him unable to breathe. They hugged and looked at each other somberly. It finally occurred to him that others had died because they skipped and saved themselves. Anna told Mike, "We will never forget this day." Despite surviving without much of an injury, Mike agreed. Obviously, it was because they moved forward beyond their seat friends that allowed them to get out of the plane alive. It was because she acted rather than deciding to sit there and die. and that things were turning in a dangerous way and that they'd die if they didn't move, and that she was right, actually. But what she did was morally questionable, because others died that may have lived because of their actions. And that's why they'll take that incident with them for the rest of their lives. Did they do the right thing? Would Mike ever have gotten up if it wasn't for his girlfriend's quick thinking and making a stern decision that she'd be a survivor, as well as the person she loved? People are placed in these compromising positions in Greedhell, but the problem didn't begin then. It began with that long list of items that could have been fixed if it was never acknowledged. If human lives were only valued more than greed and money, then many of these things would have never happened. And like many accidents, every chain of event is required for an accident to actually take place. That is, if the pilot had only decided to not fly the plane due to mechanical issues, or if the inspector who missed the damage on the routine inspection that caused the problem, or had the door never jammed. All of these things had to happen for all the people that died to die, and then were part of the damned. They changed their fate by acting fast in a moment where others had already decided to fail. I can hardly see that as a bad thing. Though, the answer will never be found in allowing bad things to happen that could have otherwise be avoided through careful and prudent preparation. That's allowing for a break in this chain that would have been sufficient to change and save the lives of those who've perished. But that Anna was paying close attention to what happened. The flames, as the thruster had poured fire on the plane's side, they were able to use it to change the fate they were handed, that information. AmericanMantics does that same plan to change the fate of the hand that we were dealt, to overcome life-changing catastrophes before they happen. And knowing they're on the horizon, God blessed all those who perished on British Airways Flight 28 from Manchester, England. It's sad to know what their fate was. And quite frankly, I use these stories because they help describe that contrast and difference. It's no different than when we talk about Kevin Paffrath, who's running for the state of governor as a Democrat out of California. And Meaty McGreedy provides a lot of contrast and comparison for AmericanMantics to go over in deep ways to see how we can excel and progress and do better, and point out to people who need to know the difference, the truth. And many people accept what's happening, but on a grand scale, what's happening over and over and over again is the acceptance of death itself for people who should matter more than they do, but that don't. And it's human values. It's a moral issue. God's people know this. It is a moral issue. We have and must value God's people. They matter so much, infinitely really, in this world where they don't matter. And what I want to talk to you about next is, and what I promised you I would do, is show you, and I'll talk to you in the background as I play it, when I was flying a plane. Now remember, I am a pilot. Well, I was a pilot myself. I sold my plane and yada yada yada. But I think you would find it interesting to know that I also fly planes, and that's why I know so much about them when it comes to these various disasters, because I know how to respond to them. And often when I see the pilots doing something wrong, I think, no, you should be doing this or that. And so I enjoy them, and I think that they help describe the situation a lot. So take a look. I want you to see here where I'm going to be putting on in just a moment. Okay, here goes. Now, what I'm going to be playing for you is my own Cessna, and I'll go ahead and put it up there. Now, you should still be able to hear me. This is my Cessna, and there I am right there, flying my plane. There's the side right there. Wonderful. That's this Cessna that I had.
Anyways, signing out. Good day. Alright, go ahead and start making that left turn now. Bring her down, bring her down. That's what it's about.
And that's it. It's all about that life, baby. It's all about that life. We love passions. Flying is such a passion of your HappyHealer lover.
Base. And then more flaps. And then we're turning for our final. You may start to see the runway at this point. And there's the runway.
Oh, yeah.
Right in front of us.
That's right.
And,
I love it. I love that experience of life. I love that God chose me to be alive. I love who and what I am. I cherish God's love for me. It's the greatest value and outcome of love itself. And it comes the experience of life. I love who I am. I wouldn't choose another body, nor would I choose another sex, family, etc. I love all of me and my family and my life. The only thing that I would change is that you would see in me the same sacred purpose and value that God instilled in all of us when He created us out of love. Love builds life, which is the greatest value there is. When you remove love, you remove value in life itself. Life only persists and becomes better where there is the love to make the difference. I see value in you and everyone else too. And that we can all see that same value in one another, and is when we can all see the value in love itself. When there is love, there is always value. Love and truth are the values that tell us the truth of our problem and summon the care sufficient enough to solve it. We have a lack of truth problem. We have a lack of value problem. We have a lack of love problem. We have a confusion, hate, and fear problem, all which work to diminish value and love. We have a greed problem, where the only value that exists is in oneself, but that is a lie to oneself. You are nothing without those who love you, including and starting with God Almighty, who is an almighty lover. I am where I start. I can only love myself so much as I am because I'm able to see your value and worth, caring immensely for you. The truth is, love is a value. And of course, it's a force. And that we're anything at all because our Creator loved us enough to make this experience called life. Don't judge the truth of God's creation. Live it, know it, and love it. that is so important to do. And I want you to know from the bottom of my heart that you mean so much to me, and you'll continue to mean so much to me. Time now is 7:45 p.m. And what I want to go ahead and talk about now is a little bit more about why people stick with this greed that kills. It's really important to understand that, and I think a lot of people don't really consider all of the aspects that's happening. I like my Diet Coke and my yogurt. Yeah. And why does anyone stick with greed that kills? It's so obvious that we would never do this greed in our homes. And people often say that they love others and that their faith is strong and that tells them to love others. But the way that they're treating others is not at the same light or fashion as they treat those in their family homes. At home, we would never tolerate greed. It's no way to live and causes way too many problems. Yet, we accept it for our larger and greater lives that affect all of our lives, and somehow we were duped that it's okay. The belief that putting profit before humanity is what leads to so many bad things, including like Flight 28 from British Airways that left 58 fatalities. Let's talk about why people are greedy at all and what we're up against to address that greed problem. I told you about my problem who put his essence in the bank and the dangers of thinking in such a way. Let's move along that thinking for a moment. Why do that? Why confuse the part of you that matters most? Is it because it seems that's what everyone else values? Well, then you've found part of the problem in Greedhell. But this is what makes them feel worthy. Because their money gives them the feeling and the aurora of power that gives them this energy to garner the extra advantages and gain friends and influence people. And that people play along like gold diggers, using people for their beauty and essence that they bring with them. Which isn't much, because they're all selling their souls to the power that causes their own death. Greed is that power. The power that makes them what they are today. So it rules their life. And if you remove the money, you remove the structure, right, that provides them their power. They're wrong, but it's that interwoven. And it's a marriage woven by money, and we already know what causes it. Money always causes these marriages that end in divorce, and people change too much of themselves or their spiritual needs and values for the value of $1, which always takes precedence over the value of a human being. So when that's the view in society already, then it must be true whoever has the most money are therefore most important. No. They control most of the world's wealth, but they also control the everyday power that influences human beings, and that they think they're a class above the rest, a class that shouldn't exist. Because of human happiness, we all must matter, and we must matter to all of us. Otherwise, we degrade human value. This is human value. It's the non-negotiable. It's a world of what happy healing and AmericanMantics is, because we must never do anything to negate the value of a human being. That's our staying power. That's our growth power. This is the essence of value that builds a new world. Know you cherish that value, build it and grow it and realize itself the true value it holds. Allow humanity to become inspired and hopeful. Let all men be appreciated for the virtue of value they provide back to our human family. And let's be better off for it. This hell is a trap for all, including those who think they benefit from this arrangement. I know it. When it holds us all back in huge ways, it holds them back too. Kings in the past didn't have it as good as our poorest. And our poorest expect air conditioning in today's era. Progress erases human standards or classes, which raises creativity and advancement and happiness. This is a cycle that we're ready-made for, yet we allow greed to literally destroy progress. The world of abundance. Instead, we trade that world for a world where we're not allowed to dream, mainly because its energy is dead set against human advancement or anything at all to do with helping humanity, and that world is controlled by greed, and that greed is the devil, and that it's got one end game, death for humanity, or keep them alive and suffering for as long as it takes to bring them to a sudden and complete stop. That's what greed is. How do we know this? How do you feel when greed attacks you? When someone's so ambitious, maybe they beat you out of that opportunity because while you were donating time to the homeless, they were out meeting with clients and pursuing their endless personal goals, and without a care in the world for you or what becomes of people like you who give so much of themselves, like Meaty McGreedy, who underappreciates the type of person who gives back or goes to church on Sunday. He's about, I'll work and make the money. He doesn't stop to consider others. What pays best in this world is to move viciously and fast for people who are competing for your time without quality, just maximizing efficiency alone, without quality of life. Greedhell's about things that don't matter, thus making us give our very real value away for free practically, and then turn back at one another and begin to see little value at all, especially in poor people. What they have to say matters so little, even to them. That's a shame that we all must bear. Yet, some are so committed to this ideal, they'll pretend that they didn't build it, that they should be perfectly fine benefiting, and that you should feel less morally to question their unchecked greed. And that's what this program is about. That's what this lesson is about. That somehow people like Meaty McGreedy can walk around without using true value in people, and that we allow that. That's the problem. And it's sad because we deserve better. We never chose these experiences for ourselves. We would have so much better, and that perceived good fortune, the idea that advantage alone is worth the trade to accept Greedhell, is what Kevin does, and I don't think it's an excuse. It's just not true. Compared to the honest truth, you shouldn't place some humans over others. That's the sin of living in Greedhell. And it's a hell of our own making, yet we can do different things in a moment if only we've seen a way and the ability to do it. And that's what AmericanMantics is. The blueprint to that reality. And it's worth getting to. I'm telling you, it's so worth getting to. I've never told you anything that was more important than that truth. That this reality, getting out of Greedhell, the devil's world, and getting you, your precious soul, your body, your experience, this life, the people you love in this life, closer to a better life that appreciates all of our value. That's what you deserve. Folks, it is 7:55 p.m. I'm going to leave it at that. I love you all so very much, and I'll see you right back here on AmericanMantics at 7 p.m. on Wednesday evening. Look for that reminder that I send out. Make sure you connect on Get Reminder. And when you do, make sure you also share this video. I would appreciate it. Like this video. You know, I don't really say this stuff that often because I expect you to do it anyway. You know, if you appreciate it. If you don't like it, then not to. I do my very best because I care. And quite frankly, I do things that net me less support, but is the truth that matters. And that it's my job to get people interested in that and to be grateful for those who are naturally interested in it. And it's so much easier to sell the lie and to do hate, and people gravitate towards that right now. But I can't do it. It's wrong, and it's killing all of us. If we could just find a way to survive, to do like our friends on this plane did, Anna and Mike, and to change our fate, because our fate in this world is the devil intends for us death, and we're careening fast towards it. And I want to see us change that fate. Let's be like Mike and Anna. I'll see you on Wednesday at 7 p.m. God bless you. I love you because I'm your happy healer lover. It's just that simple. You know what I mean? It's just that simple. I'll see you soon.